Welcome, friends, to the Burress Law Life and Friends podcast. I'm your host, Jason Burress, and today we have a very special guest, the current judge of the 471st Court, Andrea Bouressa. Andrea, how are you?
I'm good, Jason. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. Let's start from the beginning. I don't know the answer to this. Where'd you grow up?
Well, I've actually lived all over Texas. I was born in Bryan. I'm a third-generation Aggie. So I grew up in Bryan and then have lived kind of all over Texas and ended up getting to go back to my hometown to go to college at Texas A&M. Then I moved up to Collin County, went to grad school at University of North Texas, and then law school at SMU. And I've been in Collin County with my husband for about 17 years.
Oh, wow. So siblings?
I do. I have a sister, Megan, A&M, Andrea and Megan.
Okay, Andrea, all right. So did you graduate from high school in Bryan?
No, actually, we were out in San Angelo at that point, so we were in West Texas.
Okay. So what did your parents do that caused you to move around quite a bit?
Well, my dad actually was in public service for most of his career. He handled finance for a lot of municipal governments and school districts across the state of Texas, and so we moved with his job changes and ended up in San Angelo for a few years, and I finished school there, and then my younger sister finished school up in Lubbock.
Okay. So I'm guessing you had pretty good grades.
I'm sorry, she didn't. She finished school in Bryan. I can't keep track.
Okay. So I'm guessing you had pretty good grades because you went to Texas A&M. Great school.
I was a nerd, yes. I was very much a nerd.
I was not, and my grades weren't quite what yours were, but in researching you, I got to the SMU part and I saw the scholarship and your scholarship looked a lot better than my scholarship. Although I think most of us had some sort of scholarship for SMU considering how expensive it was.
I don't think I would have been able to go had it not been for the financial assistance. They were great. I think it covered about half of my tuition at SMU. I was already married to my husband, Chris, at the time, and I was almost nervous about asking if I could quit my full-time job to go to law school, and he ended up signing me up for the LSAT. He said, no, you need to at least go take the test and see what happens. And after that exam, I ended up getting the financial aid offer from SMU and didn't look back.
And SMU was just such a great school. I mean, I had a great experience there. How about you?
Oh, I did too. It's a gorgeous campus. It's absolutely beautiful. I enjoyed every minute that I got to spend there.
Yeah, and you graduated a little bit after me. I think I was 2002. You were, I think, a little bit behind me, but yeah, it was just. And it's always kind of been a top 50 school, and I think it's still top 50. So it's that top tier. It's just a great school.
I thought they had a lot of great opportunities for students for networking and kind of getting a sense of what area of legal practice you want to go into after graduation. And so I appreciated that. I appreciated a lot of the professional development and networking opportunities that they had.
Yeah. Talk to me about Texas A&M. So I don't have much experience with it, but all my good buddies are Aggies. And I have to tell you, I mean, just the reputation, the networking, it's all really high level. I'd love for Luke or Morgan to end up going. How was your experience there? What were you involved in?
Well, the first year that I started at Texas A&M, it was 1999, and that was sadly the year that the bonfire collapsed.
Oh, yeah.
And so that was a very difficult experience, having grown up going to bonfires as a kid and watching all of my family members that had gone to A&M participate in all of those traditions. And then to have that heartbreaking loss that first semester was difficult. But it was also pretty amazing to see the way the student body responded to that tragedy and just to see the Aggie spirit among the university. And it was just a really wonderful 4-year experience. I have to say 3.5, actually. My one regret is that I finished a semester early. I don't know why I decided to do that, but it was a great experience. I made a lot of contacts and connections that have been very beneficial in my personal and professional growth. I've had employment opportunities that have come out of those experiences. It's the gift that keeps giving. It's a great education and then a great experience every day after that.
Yeah, the networking is just fantastic. Did you say you were a third generation Aggie?
I am, yes.
Wow. So your dad or mom or both?
My grandfather went to Texas A&M. He was class of 49.
Okay.
My grandmother would have gone, but they were not admitting women at the time, so she had to go to school at the other university down the road. Shall go unnamed. But it made for some great stories. And then my father was class of 76, and I attended there. My sister attended there. We joked that we picked our husbands and our dogs' names based on TAMC because our dogs are Trooper and Trevor, and our husbands are Chris and Charlie. And it was unintentional, but we kept the initials thing going. So.
That's very nice. I love it. So we talked about SMU. We talked about A&M. I thought I read where you went to get your master's, and you were working like 2 jobs while you were doing it. UNT. Did I read that right?
I did. I don't know that I recommend it. I worked my way through graduate school. I worked 2 part-time jobs as a full-time graduate student, and then I worked another part-time job as a full-time law student, and it was really out of necessity. I needed to be contributing. I needed to do something to provide for the life that Chris and I were starting out on. And so I worked my way through school. It was challenging, but it helped me keep perspective, because a lot of things that seemed really large in the context of graduate school or in the context of law school seem really small when you're working in, I was working part of it in constituent services, dealing with people who were having problems with government agencies. And so when you put your school problems in the context of what other people in your own community are dealing with, it just really kind of helps you keep a positive attitude and keep going.
Sure. I saw where you had sociology degrees, I think at A&M and then UNT as well?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Did you know you were going to be a lawyer, or were you headed in a different direction at that point in time?
I didn't know. It was kind of something that was aspirational but seemed intangible. And I enjoyed sociology. I loved studying classical social theories. I just really had a passion for that. And I thought that, perhaps I might find fulfillment going the academic route. And as I got closer to completing my master's, that was when the conversation came up about, do I spend the next 3 years working on a PhD, or do I spend 3 years going to law school? And after working in constituent services for a couple of years, I thought that law school would be a much better way for me to help people. And so I ended up taking my husband's advice and signing up for the LSAT, and just went with that direction.
Oh, that's awesome. So you were appointed in 2019 by Governor Abbott, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. And tell our audience a little bit about the court over which you preside, when it was started, what kind of cases, that type of thing.
Sure. So just kind of some background that I think would be helpful is that Collin County has had record population growth, and we have new people moving into our community constantly. And that necessitates greater resources to deal with the legal issues that come along with that. And so family cases and civil cases were among some of the more increased caseloads that we were starting to see at the Collin County District Court level. And so last year, the state legislature decided to create 2 new district courts. They obviously had to work with our county because the county funds a lot of the court's operations and staff. And so the state legislature created 2 new courts, and one of them specified a priority for family law cases. And then the 471st, which is the court that I was appointed to, prioritizes civil cases, which is it can be anything from personal injury to fraud, breach of contract, property disputes, business disputes, you name it. It's a wide range of cases. But that court was created last year, effective September 1st, and that's when my appointment took effect as well.
And your appointment makes all the sense in the world, because, your background is in civil litigation and appellate litigation, correct?
Yes, that's right. Always civil litigation, very little exposure to other issues, because my focus really was on civil cases and trial practice. But as I got further along in my career, I started focusing on appeals. I found it fascinating to study what some people might view as technical or arcane aspects of the law, but I find them interesting and nuanced and challenging. And so I loved working on appellate work and focusing on what are the things that trial courts get right and what are the things that trial courts get wrong, and when do we have to come back and redo a case. And so I focused the last 2 to 3 years, I think probably by the year that I took the bench, I was doing 80 to 90% of my practice focusing on civil appeals. And so I've had cases with the Dallas Court of Appeals, the Fort Worth Court of Appeals, the Texas Supreme Court, and it was great experience for the bench because it really allowed me to hone in on things like jury charges and other aspects of a trial that are frequently error-ridden, and helping me to prepare to avoid those pitfalls.
I mean, and just for our audience sake, I mean, you've done dozens and dozens of appeals, correct?
Yes.
And I mean, these things, when they're filed, I mean, they can be like that thick with exhibits. I mean, it's pretty crazy.
It can be. I've dealt with some appellate records that have been very voluminous. I think only on one occasion have I had to ask for permission to exceed the word count on a brief. I won't even tell you how many issues we had to raise. But if you didn't raise them, they would have been waived, and we had to challenge a judgment on more grounds than I could count, and ended up being successful. But that was quite a project. So yes, appellate work can be very tedious and very involve voluminous record research and things like that. So
our experience diverges a little bit here and there, but I actually clerked for Justice Mosley on the Dallas Court of Appeals, and he was on the Court of Appeals for I'm going to guess like 14, 16 years, a long time.
Mm-hmm.
A long time. Did you know him?
I did, but not actually through practice. I don't know that I ever had an argument in front of Justice Mosley. It's possible, but okay. I don't recall off the top of my head.
Well, I learned real quick that I did not want to do appeals, so got right out of that. So I knew you had worked at Sheaf & Stone, which is really one of our greater firms in Collin County, and they have a presence in Dallas as well. How long were you there?
I guess it was over 3 years, maybe not quite three and a half years. Okay.
And you just have a terrific reputation with that firm. And we've heard, Byron and others just go on and on and on. And they're big supporters of yours for good reason. But I saw another firm in your background. So Dykema, and a lot of our old Heartline guys went to Dykema, or several of them did recently. But I don't know if it's the same firm. Were you at the Dykema that was founded a long time ago, maybe back in the 30s or 40s out of Michigan, or was it a different Dykema?
It is. So I actually ended up at Dykema indirectly. I was working with a San Antonio-based law firm called Cox Smith Matthews. And so I was in their Dallas office, and I was doing litigation, predominantly insurance-related litigation, both on the coverage side and on the policyholder side. Policyholder defense, I should say. Okay. And Cox Smith ended up merging with Dykema and becoming sort of Dykema's, I think, primary Texas presence. And so I was in the Dallas office when that merger occurred, and ended up working at Dykema for a short time before leaving and moving my career back to Collin County. Okay.
Well, I mean, those are just two terrific firms at which you work. So it's I'm sure you're proud of those firms, and it really puts you in a position to where you're, just super qualified for to be on the civil bench. Tell me some statistics about the court. You've been there a year or so. Any stats that off the top of your head in terms of cases that have been disposed of, or how many cases you have? Just anything good that the audience might want to hear.
Sure. So I do want to credit both of the firms you mentioned, and really all of the firms I've worked at. I've been really fortunate to work for attorneys that were very empowering and wanted their associates to not just help on existing cases, but grow and learn and start to take on more ownership over cases, to the point that I was handling things a lot earlier in my career than a lot of my colleagues that started in big law. And so that experience was amazing, and I can't imagine trying to do the job I have now without having had that experience and having had so many wonderful attorneys have faith in me and delegate to me things that they knew I could handle. And so now I'm on the 471st District Court bench, and we are getting anywhere from 150 to 200 new cases every month.
What was that again?
About 150 to 200 new case filings every month. It varies. Some months we'll see a little bit of a dip. We did not see a dip in September. Those numbers, I think, are still being sorted out, but I'm pretty confident that I came close to 200 new cases for the month of September. And so our challenge on the bench is to try to avoid a backlog by trying to resolve as many cases as we see coming in the door. Because if we can't do that, then what happens is you get too many cases that are pending at the same time, and people can't get in the door to get rulings and to have hearings in front of you. Yeah. And that's a problem, especially with coronavirus having added to the complexities of our docket management. So that is one of the biggest challenges, is just finding ways to help cases move forward so that we can keep up with the pace of new filings in our county.
Well, I've been before you, and I've had scheduling orders in your court, and they do move along, and you got to keep. But that's a ton of cases, 150 to 200.
Yes, and I'm a big fan of scheduling orders. I think that it's important to plan ahead, and I think it's too easy to lose 3 months or 6 months on a case if you don't have deadlines that require your attention, because frankly, there's just no shortage of other things to demand your attention. And so if you don't have those things, those sort of cues to bring your mind back to that particular case and force you to focus on it, it's too easy for them to sit. And then what happens is we'll have a case where the parties have been very diligent about getting their case ready and they want to go to trial, only now I have one that's 3 years old that I need to hear first because it got set, off to the wayside and wasn't diligently worked up. And so that creates problems for me when I have parties that are wanting to go to trial and I can't get to them as quickly as they're ready because I have older cases that haven't been moving along at the same pace. That's one challenge. I think anytime you have a new court, I had I think it ended up being over 1,600 cases. It was certainly over 1,500 cases that were transferred into my court at once. And those are all existing cases with existing settings, and they're coming from 11 other district courts. And so one of the problems with that is that you have cases that had pre-existing trial settings, and I can't accommodate calendars from that many different courts all at the same time. And so there's just some inherent complexity in trying to manage the cases that we inherited and try to get those on track where we can get them heard in a timely way and still be prepared to move forward on all of the new cases that are coming in.
Sounds like we may need a 471st and a half. Judge Burress.
I would not disagree that we've got enough cases to keep more judges busy.
Yeah. Well, so on a much more serious note, tell me what gives you pleasure serving. Obviously you could earn a lot more money in the private sector. You work a ton. I know you work a ton. And what do you enjoy about it?
I enjoy getting to see so many different lawyers in court presenting their cases. I enjoy seeing creative arguments. I enjoy hearing from witnesses and getting to see members of our community participate in the judicial system, whether it's a juror or an expert witness or one of our parties. I just enjoy watching our judicial system work. And it's an interesting exercise every time I'm asked to rule on an issue, because even when it's the same issue from case to case, there are always different facts. There's always a different procedural history or a different fact or something that's unique to the case that makes you stop and reevaluate. So there's nothing rote about the job. And I just find that really fascinating. I enjoy it. I enjoy getting to see lawyers present cases with different perspectives, things that maybe I haven't seen in my private practice when I was in private practice. That's just, it never gets old. There are no 2 days alike.
Yeah. Well, I think you do an outstanding job, and as one of many, many, many in your court. There are other courts in different counties that cases will just continue to get kicked down the road, and that really doesn't benefit anyone. And so, I've always thought if there's a little bit of pressure, it can actually help cases resolve instead of just languish. So, and with that in mind, you're running for re-election.
I am, yes.
That's exciting. It's a contested race.
It is. Yes, if I recall correctly, I believe that my opponent had filed, or not filed, but at least announced his intention to run before I was appointed. And so as I was making the decision to accept the appointment, I knew that I would immediately be walking into a contested race to keep the seat. But it was such a unique opportunity and one that certainly is unlikely to be repeated that I couldn't do anything but accept with gratitude and excitement, and it's been a wonderful year.
Sure. Why do you believe you're the best candidate? Obviously you are. I know you are, but tell us, why do you believe you're the best candidate?
Well, I think that it's really going to come down to two things. One being the experience that you mentioned. I've handled such a wide range of cases, and in particular with my appellate practice, I've handled a lot of procedural issues that come up, particularly under the Texas Citizens Participation Act, Rule 91A, just a number of procedural mechanisms that are very, a lot of them have new amendments and new changes, and that it just requires someone that's experienced and has been involved in those areas of practice recently. And I have a good understanding of how those things work, and think that I have the right experience for the job. The second, I would say, would be my experience over the last year, because a lot of cases that have come through the court over the last year are going to be going to trial soon, and I'm the person that's handled the discovery motions and the expert discovery issues and a lot of the pretrial legal dispositions that happen before you even get to trial. And so I have a lot of institutional knowledge about these cases that would be lost if I wasn't on the bench when these cases were finally called to trial. And so I think that that's one thing in particular that's extremely important. And then I would also add, just from a logistical perspective, we've had to make a lot of changes to how the court is conducting proceedings due to the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And so I have been working with all of the other 12 district court judges on our plans for how we're going to get cases heard and prioritize our use of shared court spaces in a way that makes sense and that gets things heard in an efficient way, and isn't just simply dependent upon what each individual judge would like to do. And so I have that experience of having worked with the other judges and formulated plans for how we're going to move cases forward. And I think that with all of the uncertainty and all of the change that this court's had to go through in the last 6 months, that another change wouldn't be good for the court. It's just, there's nothing positive that would come from that.
Totally agree. And I think I saw news where all of your hard work and your other judges' hard work. I think I saw where there's an approval on conducting jury trials again. Is that right?
Yes.
Right.
As of this week, we're very excited. We do have a plan approved by the Office of Court Administration, which is part of our judicial government under the Supreme Court of Texas. They manage a lot of the administrative aspects of how trial courts and appellate courts are handling things. And so they have approved our in-person jury plan, which means we now have safety protocols and procedures in place that the OCA has determined to be safe to allow us to go ahead and send those summonses and compel individuals to come to the courthouse to participate in their jury service. And so that's going to be starting yesterday, actually. It was approved for October 1st. And so we're ready to move forward with our in-person jury trials, and they won't look quite the same. There have been quite a few adjustments to even just how the furniture is arranged in the courtroom. It almost looks like a bank with all the plexiglass windows everywhere. It's a different setup, and it will feel differently for attorneys. Even experienced trial attorneys, I think, are going to find it's going to be a little bit different. But it will allow us to move forward with our cases, and that is what we need more than anything, is to be able to get these cases heard.
It's so great to hear that things are picking up and that we're going to get to have trials again. How's the campaign going? We're running down the stretch. How's it going?
It's going well. I'll confess I probably don't pay as much attention to it as I should, but the actual function of the court keeps me more than busy enough. But it's going well. I think the challenge for me is that we have over, 1.1 million people in Collin County, and a fraction of a percentage of them are going to have come through the 471st District Court in the last year. And so that means there are a lot of voters out there that I've never met that don't know me, and they don't know my qualifications or experience. And so I'm really just counting on help from friends and supporters to get the word out and let people know what we've been doing at the courthouse, and let people know that I'm ready and able and humbled by the opportunity to serve them and want to continue doing that for 4 years.
And what about early voting? It's got to be right around the corner, right?
It starts October 13th.
Okay.
And so we'll have 3 weeks of early voting, which is about a week longer than normal. And then Election Day will be that first Tuesday.
It also costs money to run a campaign, and I certainly know that I've seen where your Democratic opponent has raised a lot of money. So just tell us, how can our viewers help? What's the website? How do you donate to the campaign, and what are some other ways that people can help and serve?
So my campaign website is keepjudgeburressa.com. And my last name's Bouressa. I know it's not a very common last name, but on the website, there are a lot of different opportunities that people can get involved. You can be added to my email distribution list. You can volunteer, or you can make contributions. We do accept online donations. And then there's a P.O. box for those who would prefer to mail in a donation. And I am right now really making that last fundraising push, because we're getting to the point where I have to make final decisions about voter contact and how I'm going to reach out to voters, and how far my resources will stretch. And so any help I can get in that regard is appreciated. We also are looking for volunteers who would be willing to stand at polling places and greet voters and remind them to go all the way down ballot. Obviously, this will be the first election that we've had with no straight ticket voting. And I think that there are still a lot of people in Collin County who may not be aware of that fact, and that would need to be reminded that they're going to need to go all the way through the ballot and vote for each individual office that's on the ballot in order to make sure that their voice is heard.
KeepJudgeBurressa.com.
That's right.
All right. Okay, so one little last segment. I do want the audience to know kind of who you are as a person. And so obviously you've been very busy with the campaign. You're very busy on the bench. But what are some hobbies that you have now, or at least when you have more time? What are some things that you like to do?
I have to think real far back to having
I do too.
I do like to go for a jog. That's kind of just a good de-stressor for me, is to just get outside for a while and get some sunshine. I like to do that when I can. And I read. I read a lot for work, but it doesn't seem to do anything to discourage me from reading in my spare time too. So I enjoy reading, and that's probably it. Kids. They're not really a hobby though.
No, but they yes. have hobbies that are ours.
Yes. Oh, and that's very true. We're very involved with our kids' activities. We've got two little girls, both in elementary school, and they are both involved in a number of activities, and just, they're wonderful. We love them to pieces. They're just a lot of fun. They're bright, smart, funny, and keep us in stitches.
I love it. You know, I have a 6-year-old who plays softball, and I've got an 8-year-old who plays baseball. So those are my hobbies right now, watching them play, and it's really so much fun. What about volunteer activities? I know you were heavily involved. I think I saw the Golden Corridor Republican Women's Group. What are some things that you've done?
I have been on the board with Golden Corridor Republican Women. I felt that was a great organization for me to be a part of, that was faith-based and also very civic-minded and wanting to educate people. And I thought that those were great objectives. I've been involved with the Collin County Christian Prayer Breakfast Board. I volunteer with my kids' schools. Just whenever I can find the time, I try to do things with the girls. Well,
this has been a ball. Anything else that you want to get off your chest, or anything that I've missed?
I think we've covered it. I think the main thing that I would want people to take away is just that it's a challenging job, and it really does require someone with the right experience. And from private practice and from the year that I've spent hearing cases on the bench and handling remote proceedings and dealing with all of the changes from the pandemic and getting cases lined up to go to trial over the next couple of years, I really do believe I'm the right person for this job, and I'm just hopeful and prayerful that I will have the support of the voters in November.
I'm sure that you will. Andrea Bouressa, judge of the 471st. She is bright. She is outstanding at what she does. Go to keepjudgeburressa.com and help her. There's a lot of ways to help. Good luck to you. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you down the road.
Thanks so much. I appreciate you having me.